do you think this matters to teams, this in-season tournament, this being the first game of the in-season tournament? For those who don't know, the in-season tournament, most of the games are going to just be like part of the schedule. They're going to change the court and the jerseys that the teams wear to indicate that this is like part of the in-season tournament games. And then some of the standings are going to be calculated a little while down, maybe at the end of the month, I think. And then whoever wins that tournament is going to play one extra game, the finals for the tournament. So a couple of teams are going to be playing 83 games. But for the most part, this is just happening as a part of the part and parcel of the season. So it's going to be like regular games. Today's a Friday game. It's going to count for the standings and towards the in-season tournament. So, but yeah, I don't know. Do you think that's going to have any impact on how players play? Do you think they'll play harder? Do you think they'll care about that? Do you think that we're going to see the worst case scenario for the NBA, which would be like, yeah, Dame's going to sit today, like, which that would be horrible for them. But yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts.
I think regarding player care factor, it's just one of those things that we're not going to know until we know. But I have kind of a hot take regarding the in-season tournament. I think overall it's going to be a huge success. And honestly, this court thing that came out today only reaffirms that to me. Because look, I know, first of all, I am, if you can't tell from watching, all the post games and the first 2 episodes of this, I'm probably one of the least stylish people you'll ever meet. Like, I have terrible style. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm just the worst with that stuff. So I probably wasn't as offended as the average person looking at the courts. I'm thinking about it more from a robotic standpoint. And to me, what the NBA had to do to make people care about this in-season tournament was have it stand out from the regular season, was make it clear to people watching that this isn't just another regular season game. These have stakes that are going to matter to the players, and you as the consumer should care about too. And look, you might not find the courts aesthetically pleasing right away. They might be too jarring to you, these pictures. But one thing they are going to do is grab. You're going to immediately know when you're watching a game that this game is different than a regular season game. And so I think that that's a sign that the NBA is invested in making sure that the consumers and the players know that these games matter and matter more than the average regular season game. And it wouldn't surprise me if they have more ideas like this on the back burner that are just going to it's going to be like a snowball. And we're going to get to the end of this and we're going to watch these quote unquote playoff games of the in-season tournament like they're actual playoff games. Like, I know other people don't agree with that, but I actually feel like the in-season tournament's going to end up being a huge success.
Yeah, I think you'd be a little hard on yourself as far as your design and fashion sense. But I would say, like, for those who don't know, I am a graphic designer and a visual designer, communications designer. And design is functional. Like, design is functional. I love what they're doing with the courts and the jerseys. Like, you may not, again, like Geoff said, to reiterate, you may not like them like aesthetically or anything like that, but it's functional. And it is going to show you that there's something different attached to this game that you're watching than from all the other, I'm not sure how many, 70 something games that you're watching for the regular season. So I love the function of it. I actually like how a lot of the courts look. I actually like how the Knicks jerseys look, which is probably like, I'm probably in like the 10% of people who like those jerseys. So I think it'll be cool. I'm just thinking about it from the player perspective. Like, are the players going to care more? Because that's really what's going to make or break it to me. And like I said, to me, the worst case scenario is if, the Bucks sit one of their best players on a TNT game. That's like the first game of the in-season tournament. I don't think they will, because that would be really just asking for trouble with the league. But I do think it'll be successful. But I just think how successful it is depends on how much the players care. And for those who don't know, there's prize money attached to it. And that's pretty much the only like real incentive for the players. It's like the prize money and the bragging rights of winning the in-season tournament, which we know social media is going to like clown everybody for like, oh, you care about the in-season tournament. We're going to see so many Pat Bev memes going around for whatever team wins the in-season tournament. But I think it might matter to them. And I think it'll definitely matter to the players who aren't making a ton of money. And think about it like this. I mean, some of the prize money, it looks like, could be like up to $500,000. If you're on, whatever, a rookie contract, and you're making like $4 million, and you're talking about you're gonna get 1/8 of your salary if you win this one game. I mean, I think players are gonna care about that. I think players are gonna care about that. So, yeah, it just matters how. It just we'll have to see how much the star players care about it, I think.
I'm gonna drop another 20-second hot take. I think that player care factor is kind of overrated. Like, I think the idea, I believe it was a thing 5, 10, 15 years ago. I actually think that the regular season is pretty high level basketball for the most part. I'm not saying it's the same as the playoffs, but I think the biggest difference between playoffs and regular season isn't player care factor, and it actually is coaching. And I just think that coaches only have so much time because there's only so many practices. Like, I remember Tibbs said, I forget if it was last season or the year before, like they were coming off some road trip and he was like, yeah, we have 3 days off before our next home game. The thing I'm most excited about is to get back in the gym because we haven't practiced in like a month. Like that's just things like in today's, like, practice is as devalued as it's ever been because of all the modern technology and the data that says that basically here's how you keep players healthy, like with all the travel, they basically staying healthy through the season is the most important thing. So you don't really get these big in-depth practices where you're specifically breaking down the matchup that you have. But in the postseason, every single game you have a practice, you have a single opponent where the ins and outs of what they're doing like the back of your hand. Every player does, and you're as prepared as you're ever going to be. And I know, to be honest, I don't think that gets talked about enough with Tibbs. Like, I think that's the biggest advantage he has in the regular season is, no, I don't think he does as I think he takes it to another level in the playoffs, but I think the difference between Tibbs in the playoffs and Tibbs in the regular season is smaller than any other coach in the league. And I think the rest of the coaches it's harder for them to be prepared for these regular season games because of the lack of practices. So yeah, I actually think the players are going to care. And will it be a playoff setting? No, probably not. But I think there will be a little bit more to it than the average regular season game.
Yeah, I think that that's a solid, that's a strong take, and I agree with it in principle in some ways. The way I think player care factor matters is really like the intensity of the game. I don't think it's going to be playoff intensity, but I could imagine like a level that feels like playoff intensity. So like when I say player care factor, I mean like, are guys taking charges that they wouldn't otherwise take? Are guys diving for loose balls? Are guys like hustling back in transition when the offense seems to have a breakaway on the off chance that they could affect the shot or get the rebound if a player misses? Like those kinds of things that I don't think we'd see in a regular season game, or an early season regular season game. We could see some of that, or we could not see some of that. And I think like how that goes is going to change things the same way like in the All-Star game when we saw the Elam ending first be implemented. We saw the intensity of those games really crank up towards the end, and it was just like kind of like fun. I mean, obviously the All-Star game is like a joke early on, but we obviously saw how fundamental a difference it was in terms of how much the players were trying, how much they cared. We won't be able to see that level of a juxtaposition because players are not just like lollygagging during the regular season. But I think we do see a difference in intensity from the regular season and the playoffs. And I think there is an uptick that we will be palatable and noticeable by the fans. And that will in turn affect how the fans react. And if the fans are reacting crazy and intensely, we're seeing these different courts, these really striking, like you said, Geoff, these striking courts that guys are playing on. Fans are being very loud and boisterous and into it. Players seem more intense, taking charges, arguing harder for calls. Those kinds of things. I do think we can see like a pseudo playoff type intensity, and that would make this a huge success. I guess that's where I'm coming from with it.